Hey everybody, this is Notes on the Spectrum with Isaac Berlin. I'm Isaac, so let's get started. Today, I'm joined with Jordan Peterson, who is the Director of Business Development at the Aurora Behavioral Health, which is the largest freestanding psychiatric hospital in the state. Jordan, thank you so much for taking your time to talk to me today. Um,
Yeah, thanks
so,
for having me.
uh, so what do you do over there? What is the Aurora Hospital all about?
Gotcha. So, as you said, it's the largest freestanding psychiatric hospital system in the state of Arizona. And so, essentially, we do a lot of different things mental health related. Probably the biggest thing that people know us for is that we offer inpatient mental health services, which usually is going to be psychiatric stabilization. But I think that the biggest way to say it is that the biggest two things that we probably do as a hospital is suicide prevention is number one. So it is a place that folks would go if they're experiencing those things, like thoughts of wanting to harm themselves or maybe even another person. And then in addition to that, we also do a lot of things like substance use and detox services. So for things like alcohol, for opioid use and things like that. So that's kind of where a lot of people really, if you've heard of us before, you've probably heard of us, is for that inpatient, level of care. And so when we say the largest for the psychiatric hospitals, we have two locations. One's in Tempe, one is in Glendale. Between both of them, we have 238 psychiatric beds available where we serve adolescents and adults. And so for most of our general programming, that's 13 years and older. And then where we kind of got involved with Sounds of Autism initially is we, about 3 years ago, opened up a unit at our Tempe hospital. We call it our Specialized Needs Unit. And so with that, it's a unit completely localized in the hospital with its 15 beds that are dedicated to working with kids and adolescents diagnosed with autism and other developmental disabilities in a level one crisis hospitalization setting. And it's a full wraparound hospitalization program that goes for a lot longer than maybe a typical 2 to 3 week hospitalization. It's about a 30 to 60 day program where we work really intensively with families, as well as with outside providers. So if they have in-home supports or that sorts of thing. And so, that's the one area of the hospital that we really focus and work with, the autism population. And for that one, we work with kiddos as young as 8 years old, all the way up to 17. And so that's just a little bit about kind of what we do here, as a hospital, and kind of what brought us initially over to starting to work with Cricket and Sounds of Autism, and just being able to really get that out to the community, because that specialized needs unit, we call it the SNU for short. The SNU is actually, it's the only thing like it in the state of Arizona right now. There's probably
I was going to
15
ask that.
other, yeah, there's probably 15 other programs that are similar across the country. But really, when we talk about that really high level need, and it's not for everybody, but for those that are in constant crisis, it really is appropriate
So,
to
question.
have that. Yeah.
Um, why are you guys the only like mental hospital that has the specialized care like that? Like to me, I feel like every hospital or whatever should have a unit dedicated for that, because like it's part of our population. And like um yeah, that's strange to me that you guys are the only ones. Why do you think that is?
There's probably a lot of different reasons to it. I mean, I can't speak to some of the other hospitals necessarily, but one of the biggest things is that you really do. I mean, even if you focus on general staff training and who you have in the building, as far as roles and things like that go, when we look at, we'll use the word neurotypical unit, maybe just our adolescent unit for 13 years and older, right? While we have a lot of staff that are very well trained in working with adolescents, as well as adults, there really is a more fine-tuned training, and there's additional education, oftentimes needed to really have everybody in that environment working on the SNU be cohesively working as a team, and to have a really in-depth understanding of what autism is, what it looks like, how different factors play a role into behavior. And so even on our unit, right, we'll have our behavioral health technician staff, we have registered behavioral technicians, but then the unit in large is run by we have a director of that unit, and then we also have board certified behavior analysts that really help kind of guide the entire treatment process, because we're not looking at just stabilizing things like depression and stuff like that. We're actually stabilizing really complex and deep rooted behaviors that have been systemic and have existed probably for a really long time. And so it really is just a matter of it's teaching new skills. It's reducing unwanted behaviors, oftentimes the dangerous ones. So maybe aggression towards others, or self-harm to the point where it's causing injury. So really looking at those big scary things and trying to bring those down by teaching new skills. So it really does require a lot of different training and intervention, and just specifically caring individuals to really make a unit like that function well.
Yeah. So do you think this will be a growing field, as like, how am I trying to say this? As more hospitals, man, let me restart that. Do you think that as more hospitals realize the importance of this, that like there would be more job opportunities in this field for the specialized care that's needed? Or is it just going to be very selective in the people that try to put in that effort to get that education?
It's a good question. Could be a lot of different things on that. There certainly could be. I will say that on the outpatient side of things, so in-home supports and that sort of thing, you might have heard about different programs like ABA. ABA is a behavior principle that oftentimes your BCBAs, those board certified behavior analysts, they study it for years. It's a science on behavior, and so while we practice that on the inpatient side of things. It is something that is growing and booming here in Arizona on the outpatient side of things. COVID was very interesting because there was already a lot of different clinics and different places that were kind of popping up around the valley who were offering that, in-center or in-person behavioral support. And for, probably 70% or more of families that are experiencing behavioral issues, those types of programs work incredibly well. In fact, most of the time, they can even see things that are, really being in the natural environment. They see what the average Tuesday afternoon looks like in the home, right? And so while there was already kind of an uptick in those types of programs coming to the Valley just here in Phoenix, it was kind of amazing. I went to a resource expo, the first one in a COVID time, about a month ago, and I saw that the amount of providers that are doing that have doubled to tripled, even in this time with COVID going on. So it's there's no shortage of behavioral resources that are out there, especially on the outpatient end. For the inpatient end, I'm not sure. So there might be some others that venture into it. I know that one of our main motivations for it is that we built it based on community feedback. We work closely with places like Phoenix Children's Hospital, who were saying, hey, this is, who's constantly showing up in our doors. This is who we're really having a hard time meeting the need for the community, because, we have a select amount of behavioral beds where we can go in and do medication stabilization and things like that. But, even us, they're constantly overrun a lot of the time. So me previously coming from that world, I can speak to that because I saw it directly. I sat in the emergency room at Phoenix Children's Hospital with families many, many times. And so just to know that, there is a program that it can be more appropriate for those circumstances where, this family's gotten to a point where everyone in the household is maybe walking on eggshells, or, we've stopped doing certain behaviors out in the community, or, we've stopped outings, we've stopped seeing people because the risk for behavior is so great. It's when these things really build over time that someone then might be in need of something a little bit bigger than that outpatient support.
Gotcha. No, and I really liked how you said that the program was developed from the need of the community. Like I love hearing about businesses, companies that listen to what people need, and then they create that. I like hearing that. So
Yeah.
how did you get into this field? How did you get here, or like what was your motivation for getting here?
So I had a really strange story with it, but I feel like everyone does at a certain point. So I was going to ASU for psychology, and I worked full time in a restaurant. And I had a friend of mine at work who, he said, hey, you're going down the psychology route. What do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to be a psychology professor, which is like the weirdest goal as a psych student. But anyway, so, he said, well, my folks, we have a company where we do respite and habilitation for kids with special needs. Would you want to, do that even 1 or 2 days a week, just kind of dipping your toes into it? And so that's really what brought me into even the special needs community in general. I knew what autism was from a really abstract, point of view at that point in time. But I did that just on the side a couple days a week. I worked with a really cool kid a few days a week, and it opened my eyes to a lot more things. And then shortly after getting my bachelor's degree, I worked for a nonprofit in Central Phoenix where we worked in home with a large variety of children and their families on a lot of different behavioral things. But it was pretty intensive. We'd work in a family's home anywhere from like a minimum, as a team, 40 hours a week, upwards of 24/7 care to really help stop things like hospitalizations and stuff like that for behaviors. And so while we worked with, kiddos from, ranging from everything, we had a lot of, we worked with a lot of kids in the DCS foster care system. We worked with a lot of kids that unfortunately have experienced really extreme traumas. And then myself, just with my background, being a little bit more familiar with autism and some of the behaviors of that, that really, kind of became like my niche is when we were getting referrals for new families. It was like, well, this, let's put Jordan there. And so, it really just became a lot more experience in that regard. And so after working there, I worked there for about 5 years and eventually was managing some of those in-home programs. And I ended up hearing about a position as a community liaison over here at Aurora because they had just opened this new cool unit that works with kids diagnosed with autism. And so they said, hey, you know what that is? I said, would you like to, talk to the community about this a little bit? And so I met with our previous director of business development at that time. And I came on the team a little over 3 years ago as a community liaison. And I just worked on connecting with the community to let them know that, this is it's a resource that's out there. It's not for everybody, but it's for those that need it.
Yeah. And
so that's what's brought me here to this point.
That's great. And I always love hearing people's like travel stories through life where they're going down this path, just this direction. And then it always seems like it's that little sidestep that just leads you to a different avenue that you never would have gone down. No, that's great.
Right.
So you've touched on it a little bit, but like how or when would a person want to get in contact with your organization, with Aurora? Like what are some signs? What are some, like, when do you know it's time to reach out for help?
Yeah. So with that in general, I'll kind of give two responses to that, if that's all right. So if you're concerned about, yourself, a family member, anybody else relating to that with mental health, what I would encourage you to do is to seek that professional evaluation. The good news is, ourselves here at Aurora, we do that for free. And so part of that is making that call in. You can talk about maybe what's going on. And from there, we can do kind of a mini assessment just over the phone. And then depending on how things are, we may recommend, okay, well, this, there's some concerning things, and we might recommend that this is something you look into, like individual counseling or some type of service like that. But if we're hearing more concerning things, we'll say, come on in and we'll do a more intensive assessment. And from there, we can determine, is this something that, outpatient services would be appropriate? Or, if somebody's in an immediate crisis, it sounds like you're meeting criteria for inpatient care. So let's get you the help you need right now. And so I would say that just for general mental health, I want to be a steward to the community in that sense, and saying, don't take that risk, always seek professional help. It's always going to be worth it. And so we're always happy to help with that. Now for our, specific specialized needs unit in our program with that, it is really, we do want to make sure that it's just for the folks that are most appropriate for it. And so I would say that what it looks like is it's not oftentimes just the one, big behavior meltdown. We hear the term meltdown a lot. The thing is, that could be a one-off situation. That could be very circumstantial. That could be because of environment. It could be, specific people maybe that, help trigger some of those types of things. What I would really say, at any given point in time, there's probably always a merit to reaching out to some of those different outpatient providers and just seeing as far as what some of those initial consultations look like. But for our program, it really is, we want to make sure that it's for those folks that are in that kind of crisis state at this point in time. And so what I would recommend people reach out for is if this is a behavior that is causing, a lot of distress in the home to the point where there's, maybe daily or weekly episodes of danger to, themselves, danger to another person, oftentimes siblings, or aggression towards parents. It might be for that family that really does feel like they're, you wake up in the morning and it's this, I have this, I'm cautious with my step and I'm walking on eggshells and I don't know what the day is going to bring. And even sometimes those types of things can come with that feeling of, I'm feeling more and more helpless each day. I think I'm running out of tools in my tool set. Those types of things. And I know that it sounds really dire, and sometimes it's not quite that dire. But I would say at that point, certainly we would want to say, please, please, please give us a call, because what it looks like for that unit is it's the only program we have that isn't just a walk-in as far as things go. So with that, what we would do is we'd collect more information. We'd be requesting certain things. People can fill out a referral form actually on our website at auroraarizona.com. And that really helps kind of navigate some of that a little bit. It helps us determine, what types of behaviors are happening, how often are they happening, and really helps give us more of a basis. But from there, really, each referral, it goes through several different lenses, several different eyes take a look at that, including our prescriber, our unit director, because we do really want to make sure that we're allotting our unit to the folks that need it the most right then. And so if we're going through a referral, there's no harm in reaching out and referring and starting that process. But what we might do if it's not really meeting that criteria is we would recommend one of our community partners in the field to say, while these things are really concerning and, it's certainly causing a lot of problems, and I'm glad that we're wanting to, get going with treatment, what we would recommend is starting with an in-home service like X, Y, and Z. And so making some of those recommendations for the lower level of care. And we're always happy to do that as well. But we do want to make sure, because that can get problematic too then, because if you have a unit, essentially full right now with kids that aren't really at the higher severity range, when it comes to that, then you have someone who really is in need. And unfortunately, with it being a longer program, that person's just going to be in need for that much longer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So my favorite question, what is something that you wish you would have known at the start of your journey?
Oh, man. At the start of my journey, I mean, like in general, coming into this field, or?
I mean, it's like I try to leave that as openly ended as possible, because it could be at the start of like your educational journey, at the start of like the path that led you on this for this job, like whatever came to mind. I just I love this question because
I do like it. Yeah.
Every single person will give an answer that is uniquely from their perspective and their experiences. And like I've gotten some fantastic answers out of this, and like it's cool because again, it's from your perspective, your own lens, and it means something to you. And so like that's why I try to leave it as open-ended as possible.
I love that. I just tried to redirect it and ask you a question instead, but no, I'm kidding. No, I have something that came to mind. I think I wish in general, I'm someone that's always been, drawn to like movies and TV that are very, psychology based. Sometimes some of the like darker, grittier, like true crime stuff and all this different things. What I would wish for myself is that I watched less things regarding the stigmatizing side of mental health, both as, like a teenager and a young adult, and even through my, through my journey. I still enjoy that kind of stuff. I enjoy the, the super awesome, Netflix shows and things like that. But it's amazing how much it can just shape your worldview, thinking that if someone had asked me 15 years ago, right, like, do you know what autism is? I would think of Leonardo DiCaprio and What's Eating Gilbert Grape. And for me, that's all what autism looks like. And that's truthfully just one scenario of, what autism looks like. And similarly with mental health, it's fun. I love giving people tours of our hospital because like the first thing I'll do is I'll acknowledge that, I'm like, hey, do you want to come take a tour of a mental health hospital? And people kind of freak out at first. And I can say, okay, you're picturing a really scary Netflix image right now. And they're like, I am. Yes, absolutely, I am. And so, it's kind of fun when I can show people and walk them around the hospital. I'm like, no, it's like, hate to spoil it for everybody, but have you ever been to, an ER down the street or something like that? It's not very different than that. And so it's kind of nice, and it's something that I've very much enjoyed being able to do, is kind of break down that imagery and the stigma surrounding some of that, because that can make it really scary for people to even reach out for help. And so I think just in general, one thing that I wish was that I watched less of some of that type of stuff, or I was more aware and conscious of the impact that has, as I enjoy that kind of stuff.
That's a phenomenal answer.
Phenomenal.
Phenomenal. Well, I'm a huge advocate for mental health myself. Like I would say most people, like I've dealt with stuff throughout my life, and a lot of what we see in cinemas and on TV and streaming services now, but like it all skews what it's actually like, because it's meant to be dramatic, it's meant to be appealing and eye-catching, and like you're supposed to watch the series in entirety.
Right.
But I'm huge in that, and like I hope in my life that I can try to change that stigma and help educate people, and through platforms like this and talking with super cool people like you. And I thank you for doing what you do. I'm really happy that you took the time to share about the Aurora Hospital with me. And yeah, thanks again. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having me, and I appreciate you hosting this and having all the fun guests. It's great to have.
All right. Well, thank you again, and thank you everyone for watching. Have a good day. Goodbye.